Right, that's it. We're live. So, if
Fantastic.
anybody's watching, hello, and thanks for joining us. It's been
Good
a while since I've
morning.
done one of these, so I might get my tongue in a twist. So today we've got Kaleigh joining us from Braveheart Beasts, and he's coming over in what 12 days or something now. The countdown on my website says to do
Yeah.
another clinic with us. So if you're still undecided about whether or not to join the clinic, you can get to know her a little bit more today through our chat. So welcome, Kaleigh.
Thank you so much.
Cool. So the first question I've got on my list, I've heard your story before and I absolutely love it. But
Yeah,
could you tell us about yourself and how you got involved with horses?
definitely. So I was born the same horse obsessed little girl that most of us were. But I was born into a family that didn't really have much to do with horses or really with animals at all. I was born in the middle of the city in South Carolina, but we moved to Vermont when I was 4 years old. So that's really where I grew up. And as soon as we moved there, I begged my mom and dad to start riding lessons at a local barn. So when I was 5, I started to ride once a week. I'd go and really, I would just want to go to spend time with the horses. I really didn't think about competing or whether or not it was something I wanted to do with my life. I just went because I really enjoyed that. And I did that for, gosh, about 6 years until just by happy circumstance in a town where there were definitely more cows than people, I started working at a local dairy farm when I was 11 years old. I approached this farmer. One of the bravest decisions I made as a really shy little kid to ask him if I could come back to his farm and help with chores. And I ended up being kind of adopted into this family as their like farm kid because I was there every day, all the time. If I wasn't in school, that's where I was. And after working there for about a year, the farmer approached me one day to give me a pair of twin bull calves that had just been born on the farm. And he was a gruff New England farmer, so he walked up to me and said, you know those calves? I was like, yeah. He's like, well, you're gonna train them to be oxen. I was like, okay. And I had no idea what oxen were, but super excited to have two animals of my own. So I ran home, Mom, Dad, I have oxen. They're like, what are those? It's like, I don't know. But we went online. I found a book, got a book, and through hours and hours and hours of trial and error, I taught myself how to train them and ended up having to make the decision between the riding lessons with the horses or the cows. And I chose the cows because the cows were mine. I couldn't have my own horse, but I did have them. So I taught them how to work in a yoke together, as oxen do. They would pull carts, logs, really anything. And they did quite a bit of work around the farm. I started to compete with them in 4-H, and as they grew up, even though I loved them to pieces, I still really wanted my own horse. And at that point, still couldn't get my own horse. So, much to my parents' dismay, I taught the cows how to ride. Um, so they would ride, walk, trot, canter. We would just go bareback in a halter. We'd go trail riding, swimming, you name it. They were really really well trained under saddle, or bareback, not technically saddle because it's hard to find a saddle that fits a cow.
Yeah.
Um, and so as I kind of progressed with that, I went from riding with a halter on to experimenting with riding bridleless, since they were so well trained to their cues from the ground. I could use a lot of those cues on their back. And then those two steers, their names were Simon and Oliver. Those were the first animals I ever got into positive reinforcement training with. So I trick trained them. They would bow, they'd say yes and no, they'd give kisses, they'd shake hands, which was really fun. And then our big like signature thing was bridleless Roman riding. So I'd stand on them and steer them around. And so I was doing all kinds of kind of unheard of crazy things with cattle that people really really didn't do. And at the time I didn't even know what liberty work was, but I had started to play with working them without the yoke on, without halters on, without any kind of physical connection, because with a team, you don't have any reins or lines. You just have basically like a small whip or a stick in your voice and your body. So comparing what I was doing back then to what I'm doing now, it's crazy how many similarities there are. So I taught them how to work at Liberty, and between the Liberty work, the tricks, the competing, the riding, I started to create kind of a reputation for myself, because at the time I was still a teenager, and that's how I started teaching. So I traveled all the way to Michigan with them, all over the Northeast, teaching what I didn't realize at the time was relationship-based training methods, but with bovines, not horses.
Who
So
is your target market for that?
I know it's a pretty niche thing, but it's out there. I actually that was 8 years ago now, and I actually just went to teach one of the very first people who came to a clinic in Michigan that I met 8 years ago, and I just went back to her place to work with her and her cattle last week. So that was kind of like a fun full circle moment. But long story short, eventually, as I started to create kind of a name for myself and a bit of a business, I was able to get my own horse, and I decided to get a Percheron filly, which was an uneducated decision, but it worked out really well. So I got into driving for a while. I had a carriage business, doing hay rides, sleigh rides, weddings. And because I got into driving with the horses, I ended up jumping headfirst into a project of training mammoth donkeys to drive into the city of Montpelier in Vermont to deliver organic eggs to a co-op, which I think is safe to say is a once in a lifetime kind of experience. They were owned by a man who owned a compost company, Vermont Compost. So I had never really worked with long ears before, but I was really excited to get a little bit more experience under my belt. So I worked with them, some mammoth donkeys, a couple of mules for a couple years, and started to take on client horses. At that time, client horses, donkeys, mules, cows, like if somebody needed something trained, I would work with it. And as I really started to try to get my business off the ground, I started to realize that I knew just enough to get myself in trouble, but not enough to really progress to where I wanted to be. So I took a little bit of time to invest in myself and my riding, which is something that I'd been passionate about on the side. I really love dressage. So I spent 4 months with the Temple Lipizzans in Illinois, developing a classical dressage foundation. Went from Illinois, moved to Massachusetts, where I worked really in depth with the equine rescue system. So I would work with all kinds of equines, horses, mules, and donkeys to do behavioral rehab. So that was a big inspiration for a lot of the nervous system based work I do now, because I found it so intriguing to really be able to map out where those animals were inside, and what that was creating on the outside, what we were seeing, and how that tied into all of their previous experiences. And then taking that and applying it to liberty work. So I've done quite a bit, a little bit of everything, kind of across the board. And today I am really focused on liberty training with horses, because horses have always been my passion, and liberty training because no matter what it is that I've been doing with whatever kind of animal, liberty work, the principles of it have always been, I guess, like the common denominator in the work that I do, really understanding why the animal I'm working with is doing what they're doing and how I can use that to not only my advantage, but their advantage as well, to create a really positive relationship while still achieving really great results. So that's
Awesome.
that's my backstory. Yeah.
Well, I absolutely love that story, and I'm going to go a bit off piece now from the questions I prepared, because the real standout thing for me in that is when you said, starting off as a young child, reading your books and figuring it out through trial and error.
Yeah.
So this was something that I actually asked Ben about at the Ben clinic a few
Yeah.
weeks ago, because he says he's only had about 4 Liberty lessons or something ever.
Yeah.
So I want to understand more about this process of, because I'm one of these people that I have to have it in black and white when I'm
Mm.
learning something. Like, you do this and you do that, and you put your hand here and you put your leg there, and
Yeah.
I like to have it all figured out for me. I don't know if that's a confidence thing, or I don't know if it's an age thing. Maybe if when I'd
Yeah.
been 11, it might have been a bit different. Probably on reflection, it was a little bit. But talk me through a little bit more the trial and error, and where that comes from, and how you kept persevering in the face of the error.
Yeah. So as far as the persevering goes, I think that working with Simon and Oliver like I did was a really defining factor of how much I can persevere now as well, because as a pretty young child back then, there were so many hard days. I remember so many days coming home, plopping down on my bed and just crying because I could not get what I wanted to happen. I couldn't do it, and I'd want to give up. And then, the next day I decide, like, I can't give up. I have to go try again. And so I think as far as being able to figure that stuff out, honestly, I think it comes down a lot to learning styles. And we have like people who learn better through hearing, through seeing, through doing. And then I feel like there's this extra little corner where there are some people that learn best through feeling. And feeling definitely, I think, is somewhat like physical, like outside of ourselves. But for me, this is true, like when I'm working with my horses, when I'm working with my students, the movement in the animals I'm with, like their expression, the physical movement, all of that, it's this back and forth exchange, that it's almost like a flow of water, and you can feel the flow. And in the beginning, I was not aware of that at all. But I feel like, um, that idea of feel, like we hear the idea of feel and timing, being able to develop that in a way where it can really like guide what we're doing, I think is definitely part of it. And then also, less of the woo woo explanation, just trying, again and again and again, and being able to develop, honestly, a really good amount of emotional control to stay as objective as we can. I know as a kid, I did not have good emotional control. And on the days that I had less emotional control, those were the days that I would not get anything done. And even though I was not really good at noticing or being aware of all the little nuances of what I was doing back then, that is one thing I did notice, is that if I was ever frustrated, my animals would not want to work with me. And the big key there is they would not want to. And I think what happens is often when they don't want to, we try to make them work with us instead of becoming something that they would want to be with instead. So it was this process of slowly, for me, building the skills to keep myself under control, which there are still days where that's a struggle. I think all of us can relate to that. But trying to look at myself from the objective perspective of the animal I'm working with, helped me a lot with that. And like I said before, just trying over and over and over again. Like when I say hours and hours and hours of trial and error, I mean hours and hours. I'd go before school, I'd go after school. Like my parents would have to come drag me home because I would be there at that farm with those cows every single day. And so I think that really helped.
So where did that drive come from then? Because I listen to a lot of
Yeah.
podcasts, like the high performance podcast with like elite sports people and business people and stuff like that. Like that's not normal, is it? Most kids would have probably gone, I'm off to play with my friends or
Yeah.
something.
Yes, I think
Where did that
you're
drive come
right
from?
there. So honestly, I don't have a really good answer for that question, because I was born obsessed with animals. I was the kind of kid, like if I went on a play date. When I was in elementary school, my parents would have to call ahead and tell the other parents, make sure she plays with the kid and not the dog. Because I was just like, animals were my thing. And so as I grew up, like I didn't know specifically that I wanted to work with horses, but I always knew from the time I was really little, I was going to work with animals. I thought I was going to train whales and sea lions at SeaWorld for a little while. Thought maybe I was going to be a tiger trainer when I was really little. And then when I was at the farm, thought maybe I would want to have a farm and be a farmer, and then got into the behavioral stuff. And it's like, it's just been this constant journey, but always with this, I would say a goal, but I feel like a goal is something you move towards consciously. It's always been more of a pull, like something just pulls me in the direction that I've gone. And I think one of my best characteristics and one of my toughest characteristics as a person is that I always go where my heart tells me to. And that's something that I have been apt to do since I was little. And like I've tried to fit into the world of working jobs with hours and working for somebody else. And they're all great life skills to have. And I'm glad I had the working experiences that I did. But there's always been this draw back to right where I am now. So I think I'm incredibly, I'm not going to use the word lucky. I don't really like lucky, but blessed to have that drive and the gifts that I do when it comes to animals anyway. Yeah.
So this probably leads me nicely onto another one of the questions that I
Yeah.
wrote, which was, I know we're both believers in like the law of attraction and that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
how much do you think that's played a part in your journey?
So I think that law of attraction or manifestation is huge. And for me, that's something that I didn't like grow up believing in that, but so much of it has happened in my life. It's one of those things like I can't help but honor that it's there. Because like my mom specifically has always been my biggest supporter. So we laugh because it happens to both of us. Like we always say, be careful what you say out loud, because oftentimes life will give that to you if you have like true purpose or meaning behind it. So for me, the first thing that really came from the law of attraction. This is a cool story if you really believe in that stuff. When I was 12, I went on a family vacation to Arizona with my mom, my dad, my sister, and Arizona is one of like the spiritual hot pockets of the world. Like there's a lot of stuff that happens there. And we went into this shop, like the crystal shops with all the rocks, and I couldn't choose which one I wanted. My parents told me I could get one. And so the lady in the store was like, walk around, like whatever one calls to you, that's the one you're gonna get. I was like, okay. So I walked around and I picked up this stone and I brought it up to the counter, and she was like, are you sure this is the one? I was like, yeah, like that's the rock I want. And she went on to tell like more my parents than me, because I was pretty young at the time, about like, oh my gosh, this is Rainbow Obsidian, and this is the start to like this incredible journey of like finding your darkest places and coming out onto the other side like stronger than you've ever been, like this crazy stuff. And my parents were like, whoa, okay, we should go. So I like got the rock. We left, and this is the weird thing. For the rest of the day, I cried uncontrollably. And 1 week later, I got Simon and Oliver, and Simon and Oliver were like, they were the start to everything. And one thing I really like as far as the law of attraction goes is that when it happens, like when you call those opportunities to you, I think they always show up in ways that are unexpected. Like you can't say how it's going to happen. You can only say what the outcome is going to be. So the fact that really bizarre experience for me happened in Arizona 1 week later, I would say the thing that kicked off this entire journey for me is pretty cool. And from there, like my boys Alchemist and Elgin. Elgin is another one. I got Alchemist. He was my very first client horse, and my very first problem horse, as I like to say. And I had him for about a year. I was getting into Liberty work with him. And I remember this vividly. I was driving to Cavalia Odisseo with my mom, once again, my biggest fan. And whenever we drive anywhere, I just like daydream, talk about ideas. And I was talking about how one day I really wanted to find a teammate for Alchemist. And he and a handful of other foals were bred like a town over from where I grew up. So I knew their breeder. I knew he had brothers, and she had Elgin. And I knew she had Elgin, and I was just like saying out loud how, oh, one day, years from now, if I have the time and the money, I'm going to try and convince her to sell him to me, and I'll work them together. And I kid you not, the next day, out of the blue, she messages me to let me know, very unfortunately, that she had lost her job and had to sell her horses and was wondering if I wanted him. So just stuff like that, like some of the biggest things that have happened in my life come from moments where it's just like they're so unexpected, but also not unexpected. Like you can't expect them to happen, but the way my mom puts it, and I really like this, is that feeling the gratitude for the thing as if it's already happened is what draws it to you. So just being thankful for things, and it's a bit of a thing to wrap your head around before they happen, I feel like puts us in a place to actually receive them. So
yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
Do you have any other, I'm going to ask you a question, then I'm going to shut the window because some tractors making a racket in the field. So you can talk to yourself for a minute. Do you have any other sort of daily manifestation practices other than just sort of feeling gratitude? Right, I'm going, you can talk to yourself.
Yeah, go for it. I don't honestly have like specific daily practices that I do, although I think especially with the Liberty work, like I like to tell people that Liberty is more of a lifestyle than just an exercise that we do with our horses. I think my Liberty work is my mindfulness practice, because I think that law of attraction plays hugely into how our horses work with us at Liberty. Like I know anytime I've done a performance where I am worried that Alchemist is going to peace out because he is my less reliable horse, he always does. if I can keep myself in that place of like really being at peace in the present with them, they're always so much more connected. I think emotionally too, like this idea of being able to essentially disconnect ourselves from like the physical, so like our body, our space, our environment, and time. Like those are the three things that really dictate everything that happens in the outside world. And the outside world is not where the law of attraction happens, or any manifestation or mindfulness. Like none of it is attached to any of those three things. Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about those in some of his books, and I
becoming supernatural at the minute, and it's blowing my mind.
I know, he blows my mind all the time. I'm like, whoa. So right now I'm into his book, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, which is all about the law of attraction and how we fall into these patterns of being ourselves, like creating habits and personalities that draw the same things to us all the time, and how to go in and break those patterns. And so those, he calls them the big three. And I love in books when you hear something in it, like it frames things that you've like thought of before, but not really in a way where you could ever like word it. So that really made a lot of sense to me, because if I'm with my horses, I will tell you, and even when I'm not with my horses, anytime I'm stressed out, it has to do with one of those three things, whether it's expectations, really is the biggest thing for me in my environment or from myself, or time limits, because, you know, as much as I love playing with my horses, I also have to play the role of secretary, marketer, business manager, social media guru. So there's a lot that goes into the business that doesn't have to do with horses. So there's always outside pressures, but my horses, I love that they're always there to remind me to kind of come back to myself and honestly to them. Like I've gone through a lot of changes in my life in not a very long lifetime. And no matter what I've gone through, my horses have always been there for me. So yeah, I'd say they're my daily practice.
Well, my next question, I think you've almost just answered it there, is what is the
Yeah.
most important thing you've learned through your journey with horses so far?
The most important thing that I've learned, honestly, is how to take up space. Because for me, as a kid and as a person, I'm not naturally like confident, and I don't come off that way anymore because I've practiced a lot, first unconsciously and now definitely consciously, to take up space in the sense of holding space for myself to be myself, and to stand up for the things that I believe in. I've gone through experiences in my life that have challenged not only me, but also the potential I've had to chase this career that I have now, which is my absolute dream. I live my dreams out every single day. And one experience in particular, which had to do with a relationship, I almost had that completely taken away from me. It was this black and white decision of, do I make this absolutely crazy decision that most people probably aren't going to understand to honor me and what I know that I want, or am I going to do what most people would deem the responsible thing, this like the quote unquote normal thing, fit in with society, and not make those really hard decisions for me. And my horses, I know, are the things that drove me to make that one really hard, really important decision in my life, but two, on a daily basis, the exchanges that we have with them. Like I always tell people that relationships come in the exchanges. Like it's not something we can make one time, and it's not something our horses can give us. We create it in our back and forth exchanges. I call it acknowledgement, or changes. Like the horse changes, you change, the horse changes. Like if one of you does something, the other one changing what they're doing as an acknowledgement of the change that just happened is where the relationship comes from. And those changes are where I've learned to hold space for myself, first with horses. With me, horses, animals, it's always been easy to say, like, this is me, this is how I'm showing up, what are we going to do about that? And sometimes that's really good, sometimes it's not good, and I have to change that. I have not ever been good at that with people, and horses have really taught me to be aware of that. I'm terrible at making people uncomfortable when they make me uncomfortable. Like I'm the first one to, as I would say, give space. Like if I'm with a horse, I have my personal space, right? I call it the bubble because I haven't come up with a cooler term for it. And so if a horse comes into that bubble and that makes me uncomfortable, I don't hesitate to say, excuse me, please. That's my space, physically my space. Please step back. Energetically, even if I'm with a horse and they get really concerned about something and that energy comes up in an uncomfortable way, I'm not going to hesitate to let my energy change to tell them that I'm going to turn that off. The day is beginning. I'm gonna tell them to come back down, and not tell them in a way that doesn't honor what they're feeling, but to help them feel better about themselves. And so they have taught me, and I'd say are currently still teaching me, how to apply that with people. Like knowing that if somebody makes me uncomfortable, it's not my job to step back and allow that to happen, but to maybe ask myself why that's making me uncomfortable. If it's something that I need to change, between like my relationship with that person, is it a one-time thing? Like all the same questions I ask when I'm with my horses, they've taught me to start asking that with people as well. And I think that that's been huge, and one of the reasons why I've been able to really follow my heart and as I say, like honor the things that I've wanted in my life, because it's not always easy to do. You know, people talk about following your dreams. It's like, oh, follow your dreams, follow your heart. It's going to be this warm, fuzzy, glowy adventure. And it is one of the hardest, messiest things you will ever do because of how many conflicting emotions and experiences. Like dreams are not just this straight on path that you go on. So really having the things I need, not to sound mushy, but to believe in myself and the things that I want. I think that has come largely from them.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, Stu's popped, I don't know where he is, he's downstairs somewhere. He's popped a question up.
Yeah.
Woo, there we go. Kaleigh, who would you like to work or train with that you've not yet had the opportunity to do?
Ooh, that is a good one. Honestly, I would love to meet and work with a trainer named Sylvia Zerbini. She is based in Florida in the US. She's one of the first Liberty trainers that I saw when I knew what Liberty work was. I saw her at the Equine Affair one year working with her Arabian stallions, and oh my God. And I said, oh my God back then. I say, oh my God now, because she has a really different style than what you see a lot of. She's really quiet, but she goes a lot like with the language of the horse. Like there's cues, but watching the way that she moves with them, it's just absolutely incredible. And so I love getting like a taste from a lot of different trainers. I haven't really worked, as I'd say, like in depth with anybody. I've had some like intensive study experiences and things like that. But she would be on my list of somebody to at least meet, if not really get to work with and toss questions around with.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think I follow her on Facebook. I know what you mean. Right. What we've possibly covered this as well. What frustrates you in training, and how do you deal with that?
That is a good question. So I think like in the moment that I get frustrated, the thing that is frustrating me, as is true with most of us, is that my horses are not doing what I am expecting them to do. Big emphasis on expecting, because it all comes down to expectations. Our perception is really, really influenced by what we are expecting to have happen. Like if we're walking down the street and we're expecting somebody to hand us $100 and it doesn't happen, we're going to be pretty disappointed, versus if we're not expecting it, right, and it happens, it could make our day. So I think with our horses, the same thing is really true. And one thing I know about myself, which is one reason why I've been able to do as much as I've done, but it's also a trait that I really have to keep in check, is that I have extremely high expectations, not only of my horses, but also of myself. And so one thing I've learned through a lot of repetitions, not unfortunately, because it's been a really important lesson, is that like when I'm frustrated, it's never the horses. It's never the horses. One of my favorite quotes is that frustration begins where knowledge ends. And it's so true. Like I get frustrated when I don't know what to do to get what I want to have happen to happen. So for me, a lot of the time, first, the way I deal with that is checking myself and saying like, Kaleigh, chill out. It's not like, sometimes I feel like it's like we go in like we're going into battle. Like this has to happen, like do or die, life or death. Like it's not that way. And especially understanding like the nervous system, parts of the brain, we go into that like animal reactive, like, do it now or else. And that's just it's not necessary. It's not appropriate for doing that stuff. So first checking myself and letting myself take a step back, right? Disconnect from the environment, check in with my body, which at that point is pretty tense. Disconnect from my body. If I'm saying, oh my God, I only have 15 minutes left in this training session, disconnect from time, like the big three, as Joe Dispenza says, which I love that. I want to disconnect from the things that are triggering me that way, and then really start to take a deep look at my expectations. And like I'm feeling this especially now, as like this week is, as I would call it, the kickoff week to an absolutely insane fall schedule, which I'm so excited about, because it means things are happening. Things that I have wanted to have happen for my entire life are at my doorstep. I'm traveling to to England. I'm going to perform at Renaissance festivals and fairs, and taking a drive to California to pick up a brand new baby Spanish colt, which I'm like super excited about. So exciting. Maybe going to the equine affair in the fall, but I'm looking at this like this massive stretch of time with a lot that I have to get done and a lot of expectations that I have to meet. And like already just 2 nights ago, I had one of those sessions where I had to back myself off and remind myself, like, especially as somebody that loves to perform, like people aren't coming to see the things that I'm just learning to do. Like if the things I was just learning to do are the things that people were coming to see, people probably wouldn't be coming to see them. So being able to still appreciate what I've been able to do and what my horses are willing to give me, I think is the biggest thing that pulls me out of it. Like really remembering why I do what I do, because I do it because I love them, and not because of the external validation. Like it's really exciting to perform. Like I love performing. That's like one of my favorite things to do, because the whole energy changes when it's really, I think that's really when it becomes artistic. Like the most artistic is when it's like in that setting, at least for me. Like I have a bit of an alter ego that the more I perform, the less it becomes an alter ego and the more it just becomes me. You can ask my intern. We have some pretty funny days around here, but that's where a lot of my confidence comes from. So just really appreciating what we have, what we've been able to do in that moment, like not what we're going to get tomorrow, not what we're going to get next week, maybe not even what we had the session before. Like it's not always about what we're headed to, but sometimes about what we got and now can't get again. Like just staying in that place of gratitude, I think helps that.
The question of external validation is really interesting, isn't it? I was watching a video the other day and somebody was saying, oh, it's terrible. You shouldn't be doing this if you're trying to show off or something. But we're all trying to prove something, even if it's just to ourselves, of like, look, I'm better than I was yesterday. Or, there's always something that we're trying to prove or trying to, I don't know what the word is, validate ourselves with. And some of us do it different. Like you like to perform, I like to compete.
Yeah.
I desperately want my dad to say, well done, that was amazing.
Yeah.
or, my friends that are out there doing, well, I nearly said normal stuff, but more traditional stuff. I want them to go, wow, that was amazing. I'm like, why?
Yeah.
Why do I want that? Why do I need that? But we all do. We need something, don't we?
Yeah. And I think that's been one of my biggest struggles, is making sure that what I'm doing is coming from not a place of needing that, but wanting to share it with people. Like I think we all want to be appreciated, but I think it's different to need it and to do whatever it takes to get the approval of other people, versus wanting people to value and appreciate what it is that you are and what you have and what you do, without needing to change it for them to see that. Like for me, I think that's been the biggest defining factor, like going back to the idea of like making those hard life decisions that most people wouldn't understand. Like I feel like in situations like that, if external validation is the most important thing, you're not going to make the decisions that people don't agree with. So I guess the question I have for myself and just in general now is like, what's the difference between external validation and just valuing appreciation? Because I think that, as you said, is definitely something that we all kind of crave.
Whether we admit it to ourselves or not.
I know.
Cool. I like that distinction. That's good. So what's the best piece of advice you've ever received, either horse related or not?
Oh, that's a really good question. I've had a lot of really influential people in my life. Like the two biggest ones are my mom and then Alan, the man who gave me the oxen. But I think like both of them have given me loads and loads of advice, which have really made me into who I am now. The one piece of advice that like pops into my head, that didn't come from either of them, came from a friend of mine. I was working with her horses, and this was the day that I keep referencing this time in my life I had to make a really hard decision. I was married for a very short time, for 4 months.
Oh, wow.
And it was a really, like, I don't need to go into it, but it was not the right situation for me, and I did not know what to do. Well, that's a lie. Deep down, like, I feel like we all have a bit of knowing inside of us. I was not willing to acknowledge that I knew what I needed to do. And this woman, we still talk every now and then. She's one of just the purest, most honest people I've ever met. And her advice to me was basically, don't wait until it's not hard to do it. Because I was standing in the barn with her, and like, it was the first day where I was like, oh my God, like I actually have to do this. And it was almost Christmas and I was going to wait. So I didn't upset his family and like all this different stuff. And she was like, no, you can't wait until it's not hard to do it. And that, I think, rings true for so much of what I'm doing now. Like, it's put me in this place, especially coming from a place of almost not having any of this, to, in those moments now that I'm here doing what I really want to do, is like, when it's hard, it's almost become like the reason to take action, is like, when you start to feel that push of like discomfort, whatever it is, like, that's not the moment to freeze. It's not the moment to wait. It's not the moment to back off. Like, that is the moment to have some decisive action. And decisive action, this is the same as training with horses. Sometimes doing nothing is the best course of action, but making sure that there's purpose and intention behind it is the most important thing. So I think that has been a thing that stuck with me through my life. Yeah.
Right. That's me. Right. That's blowing my mind as well.
Yeah.
You'll have to write a book, I think.
Oh. Yeah.
Dr. Joe. Oh dear. So what's your relationship with fear then, by the sounds of things?
Yeah, so my relationship with fear has changed throughout my life. These days, I really try to let it be the motivator for me to create a strategic course of action. Like, I strive to have a really healthy relationship with fear, in the sense of, if I recognize that I am afraid of something, not letting it stop me from doing that thing. In fact, even if I really don't have a lot of interest in like pursuing that thing, pursuing it to an extent where I don't feel that fear is important to me. However, I think conquering fear comes from confidence, and being able to build confidence comes from putting ourselves in situations that we can actually be successful at. So, this idea of like the adrenaline junkie, that has never been me. And especially in my performances now, like, I'm incorporating gymnastics and fire and like all this crazy stuff, which anybody that knows me is like, oh my God, like, who is that? Because I was never like the adrenaline chaser. I'm one of the biggest chickens you'll ever meet. But like, being able to pursue those really cool things comes from, I think, breaking it down into, in those cases, safe steps to learn about stuff. And even with horses, like, being able to break down the things that I am afraid to do. Like, as somebody that loves performing, one of my biggest fears is performing. As ridiculous as that sounds, is like, those moments before I step out on a crowd, like in front of a crowd. Oh my gosh, there's nothing that gets me more than that. So, and especially, like I say, as a performer, I should say, as an up and coming performer, like, this is something I'm just getting into, still learning loads and loads about. Like, I have had to make changes to the way that I set myself and my horses up for success, to make sure that we're actually successful. Like, I have these big aspirations. So when the opportunities come up that are really big, and I'm like, oh yeah, we're going to go for it. But if we're not ready, which is something that has been one of the hardest things to accept, is like, if we're not ready, it's not going to be productive, right? It's not actually going to get us closer if we're not at a place to be able to step into that space and conquer what it is that we're there to do. So trying to break things down into steps, like step by step, it works best for our horses when we're training them. And I think it works best for us when we're trying to accomplish anything, is like, what's the smallest next step we can take? What's the most manageable thing we can do to get us in the right direction? And I think being able to visualize that is what helps me overcome that stuff.
I think that's probably one of the biggest things that I've learned over the last couple of years is the
Yeah.
difference between being brave and being confident. Because to me, being brave, there's an element of taking risk and,
Mhm.
almost being, I don't know, silly in the risk taking. Whereas
Yeah.
confidence is based on evidence of success, like you say, through small
Yeah.
steps. And then
Yeah.
that's how you do actually believe in yourself. Whereas
Right.
to be a jockey or an eventer or something, you've got to be brave because
Right.
in taking risks, I'm never going to take risks like that. I thought that I had to be brave to be a horse person and to be a
Yeah.
rider. But no, I want to be confident. And if all that means is I just walk a circle
Yeah.
on a sunny day, then I'm confident doing that, then that's brilliant. So
That's
yeah, I
awesome.
think you eloquently described perfectly what
Nice.
my biggest discovery in the
Yeah.
last couple of days. Right, okay, so let's have a couple more questions and then
Yeah.
we can tell us about the clinic that we're going to do. So, what's been your biggest failure and what did you learn from it?
That is a good question. And I try not to frame things in my life as failures. Like, I don't think I've ever failed at anything that I've done, in the sense that I've always gained something from it. I failed at achieving expected outcomes many, 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 many times, many times, which I think you have to do if you have big aspirations or directions that you're headed. Like, you have to be willing to have the unexpected happen and to send you in a direction you don't want to go. But I always try and find the learning in what I've done. So I think one of the biggest moments in my life that has not turned out the way that I expected, honestly, comes down to an experience I had last fall with my horses. Like, one of the biggest performance opportunities that we had yet was to participate in the ILHA Invitational Freestyle at Equine Affair. And me and my big expectations, I had this freestyle planned, and we um, we had practiced and practiced and practiced. And that idea of, like, if you're fearful, preparation, like, that's my biggest thing, is like, you go in prepared. And so I was determined, like, I was going to be prepared. We trailered to different arenas, like, we practiced until they knew the routine and I knew the routine, and like, there I was confident going into that, and had a very abrupt awakening to how underprepared my horses were to compete in an environment that way. And it's not that the whole thing was a disaster. Like, I still got some good stuff from them, but it was eye-opening to me to see how worried they were. Even though, like, I had really put in a lot of conscious effort to prepare them to not feel that worry. Like, it's important to me that they're comfortable while we're doing what we're doing. And so, like, they were not comfortable, I was not comfortable. And learning does not happen when we're comfortable. So that is one of the moments that I think I learned the most in the shortest amount of time. It was the longest 6 minutes of my life. And so that's an experience I still reference back to, I think, in positive ways. Like, it's a good reminder to it's really changed a lot about what I've done with them. Like, I told myself that I could have this year to take and adjust my expectations and change how it was that I was doing stuff. Like, not choose to go do a performance because that would be a good thing to have on my resume, but choose to go do it because it would build their confidence, or it would build my confidence. And to take, like, this entire year to see how that shift in perspective would change things for them and for me. And it absolutely has. And I mean, as I'm sitting here, we're really about to go into the stretch that's gonna give me the feedback that I'm looking for as we start to go to these performance venues that, yes, are pretty good size, but intentionally don't have the same pressures as, okay, think about environment, body, time. You have 6 minutes in one of the biggest arenas in the Northeast to show us what you and your horses can do, right? So removing that pressure and being really picky about where I put myself and my horses, I think, is the biggest lesson that I've learned from that. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So, tell us about the clinic then that you're going to be doing at my place next
Well,
month. If anybody's
yeah.
thinking about joining,
Yeah. So
who is it suitable for? What will they be doing?
yeah. First of all, I just want to say how excited I am to come back. So this clinic, we're gonna do 2 days more focused on liberty principles and 1 day more focused on trick training, because I think even though they go really well hand in hand, it's nice to have a little bit of a separation. So as far as my clinics go, I work really hard to encompass things for all experience levels. Like, there are many of us out there who haven't had any experience with liberty, and then there are those of us who have taken that dive into this incredible journey of discovering liberty with our horses who have questions, who want to take their skills to the next level. And I really work hard to make sure that I can accommodate both. So I just like to say that these clinics are for anybody looking to take their skills and their experience with liberty to that next step with their horse, regardless of where you're at. If you've never done it before, if you've never even heard of it before, absolutely fine, right? We're here to learn. I'm not expecting anybody to show up already knowing what it is that I'm going to need you to do, right? That's my job. So really, we're going to be covering what I would call liberty principles. So essentially practical application of the learning theory. So things about like the nervous system, maybe a little bit about like the polyvagal theory. I don't want to throw out big words here because it's not going to be a technically based thing. If that's something that people are interested in, we can go more in depth into that. But I think it's daunting for people to try to learn about this stuff because it's presented as something that's so complex. So I really like to share kind of a simple visual or framework of how we can keep track of our horses from the inside out. And then we're going to take those principles and apply them to starting to build the foundation that we would need to work our horses at liberty. So working on body control in a way that really targets what I would call softness or relaxation under pressure, which is applicable with liberty, but also every other discipline. That's what I love about liberty work, is whatever you do with your horse, I guarantee you this will aid in your toolbox and aid in whatever it is you're doing, just with communication, physical and emotional. And so taking those 2 days to go through some of my foundational pieces, if anybody wants to join in that has some foundational pieces in place, going into some more advanced movements too, definitely an option. And then on that day of trick training, getting into the science behind positive reinforcement, which I'm a big fan of, really understanding the hows and the whys behind it, what makes it effective, and then also where and when to use it, because I also use a lot of pressure and release in my training. So I think trick training is a great way to really see the combination of the two while getting some pretty cool and pretty fun things from our horses. So that, I think, is just a general overview of those 2 days. I never like to make it too specific because I always like to throw in a couple surprises. So
Awesome.
So that's just a little bit of what we can expect.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
So if people are interested and they want to find out more about you, where can they find out more about you?
Good question. So I am on Facebook under Braveheart Beasts, and also you can visit my website, braveheartbeasts.com, to see events, news, and everything coming up.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, I will let you get back to your busy schedule, and I look
Okay.
forward to seeing you in less than a fortnight. So,
Yeah.
thank you so much for your time. It was lovely chatting to you, and yeah, can't wait to catch up soon.
Yeah, me too. Can't wait to see you.
Brilliant. All
All
right
right.
then. Thank
Thank you
you.
so
See you
much.
later. Bye.